everyone. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. It's great to see just from the chat how many different countries people are attending from. So yeah, it's fantastic to see you all here. If anyone at any point wants to ask a question, please drop it into the Q&A pod, as Yandira mentioned. We will try and pause and answer questions as we go along, as well as allowing some time at the end to go into a bit more detail. So please, anything that I don't explain clearly enough or anything that you want me to go into more detail on, please ask the question. We will try and pause and address those as we go along. So, hi, I'm Rob. I think I've already introduced myself. I'm Head of Professional Services at FlowFuse. I've been working at FlowFuse for nearly 3 years now, and I've spent about the past 6 years working on building commercial scale Node-RED applications for various different industries. So a little bit about my history that relates to today. So before I joined FlowFuse, I worked at a company that was using Node-RED to link together many different online systems. So when you have data in one format, you need to transform it into a different format and then push it into a different system. Node-RED is a really good way to solve that, especially when talking about IT and OT systems. The problem was with Node-RED at the time, so this is before FlowFuse had come to market, how can you actually manage these applications in a structured way? So how can you develop a new version of an application, test it, and then deploy it into a production environment without having to go in and do a lot of manual configuration? So I think for those of us who've worked as software developers, I should say I have not, but those of you who have, there are tried and tested ways to do this, often using tools such as GitHub, which makes it relatively easy for a team of developers to or engineers to edit an application, test that application, and then when it's ready, update the production version update the production version of that application. So I think what FlowFuse does a great job of. So what is it that we need? So a solution that deals with that DevOps, deals with the testing and deployment, but suited for Node-RED IIoT. We also need something where we can deal with many instances of Node-RED. I think in that previous company I mentioned, I was probably managing maybe 30 to 50 instances of Node-RED, as well as development instances of them. So how do you manage all of those instances of Node-RED when you maybe have tens or hundreds, or I think the largest that I've seen is even into thousands of instances of Node-RED? How do you manage all of those in a way which is easy for all of your team to participate in? So the answer to that is FlowFuse. FlowFuse can make it easy to build, update, and deploy complex applications. It makes it easier for you to do testing in environments which are representative of production, so to try and catch issues before you do a rollout. It makes it easy to deal with environment variables. So say, for instance, if you have a OPC UA server for development, a separate one for testing, and a separate one for production, it makes it easy to make sure your different instances of Node-RED are talking to the correct services, the correct servers when you're doing your testing, so you're not going to end up mixing up testing and production data. It also makes it really easy, and we're going to demo this today, to deal with rollouts across potentially different time zones, or you might be doing rollouts where you roll out a new version of an application to a small set of Node-RED instances first, and then once that's okay and you've not had any problems with that, you might then want to continue to do a full rollout to a larger set of instances. And the final step, or the final thing that I find really useful, is, hopefully this never happens, but if you realize you need to do a rollback, so if a new version of one of your Node-RED flows gets to production and then you realize there's a problem, FlowFuse makes it really easy to do a rollback, and that's something else we're going to demonstrate today. So I want to talk through a little bit of the demo infrastructure that I'm using today. So everything's simulated. I use this commonly for doing demonstrations when I'm working with our sales team. So let's just talk through this. From the top, first of all, we've got two Node-RED instances, one for development, one for staging. These are all edge devices. So for those of you who have used FlowFuse a bit, you may well have come across our device agent that allows you to manage remote instances of Node-RED from your FlowFuse team. So all of these instances are being run by the device agent. The reason I'm doing that is I want all of the instances through development, staging, and on into production to be as identical as possible. So I want to be able to be confident they're running on the same hardware, have the same access to the same resources. And the way that I find that the way that I do that to try and make that as standardized as possible is I will use the device agent for development and staging, because all of my production instances are also running on the device agent. So in the top box, we've got one instance of Node-RED for development, one for staging or testing. We've then got a simulated manufacturing facility somewhere in Europe, which consists of multiple Node-RED instances. And then we've also got the same an Asian manufacturing facility, again, with multiple Node-RED instances. In this scenario, each one of those Node-RED instances would be associated with a production line in a factory. So those Node-RED instances are collecting data from that production line about exactly what's going on at that moment. They're then going to send it into a central system, which can write it into data storage that the whole organization can access. Specifically, then, if we come over to this side, so this is the Node-RED instance here, which is collating all of that data and putting it into a standard format. That's then being written into a historian. So in this case, I'm using InfluxDB, and it's also been written into a UNS. So a unified namespace is hopefully a term that you're coming across quite a bit. It's basically an MQTT broker, but the idea is to have a structured way to store all of your data for an organization, so that rather than if a different, let's say if you need to do some analysis comparing different production lines across different geographical areas, rather than whoever's doing that analysis having to go to different sections of your business and saying, okay, I need access to this data, I need access to that data. The point is that all of that data is already centrally available in the UNS. So whoever needs to use the data, subject to them having the relevant permissions, can get on with interrogating that data. We can see, I've just had a question come in. So is the centralized data storage for FlowFuse high availability? So you can change the configuration of the MQTT broker within FlowFuse. The standard is it's just based on one broker. So that to me wouldn't class as HA, highly available. But you can then extend that out to other brokers. So there are ways to use a group of brokers working together to deliver high availability. So you can configure that. It's not something that FlowFuse provides out of the box. FlowFuse, the reason that FlowFuse has MQTT within it is we actually use it to deal with communicating with all of these remote instances that we can see on this diagram. So that's why we first put it in there. It allows us to collect logs, send messages backwards and forwards, and deal with deployments. So we've now made that available to use in other scenarios, such as being able to access it directly as an MQTT broker. But at this time, we're not focusing on delivering MQTT as one of our core things. It's something that we're adding. It wouldn't surprise me if we add HA in the months to come. Okay, then. So yeah, I've explained all of the infrastructure that we're going to work on here. Okay, so now let's get to the demo. One moment. I need to go out of here and into here. Okay, great. So this is the interface for FlowFuse. Hopefully some of you have seen this before. But for those of you who haven't, everything that you need to do with regards to managing your Node-RED instances that you do within FlowFuse is all done via this interface. So pretty much everything you can do via web interface. You can access that from subject to whatever network you're running this in. So this instance here is just running on the publicly addressable internet. So I could log into this from anywhere in the world and interact with the applications that I've built easily. So let's look now. So the instances I was just describing on the slide before. So first of all, these are our remote instances. So as I was saying, we have a development instance, we have a staging instance, we then have 10 instances of Node-RED running at an Asian facility, and we have 10 running at a European facility. So those are those instances. Now, I can see various information about these. So if I just pick a random one, so I'll go on to production Asia 8. So I can immediately here see a really useful snapshot of what's going on with this particular Node-RED instance. So I can see it's running Node-RED 317. I can see that it's currently online and it checked back into FlowFuse just a few seconds ago. I can see which version of my application, of which version of my flows it's running, which we'll touch on a little bit in a few moments, because I will build a new version. I can also look at the Node-RED logs, which I find incredibly useful for troubleshooting. So, and including the logs which came from earlier today. So it's not that I've just opened up the logs now and I can see what's happening. If I've just experienced a problem, a crash or a timeout, I can look at what was already happening. So I can see when preparation for this webinar, when I was doing deploys earlier today, I can see all of that going on, even though this particular instance is not physically at the same location to me. So that's one really useful feature. So the other thing I can do is I can actually interact with these Node-RED instances via the web browser. So to do that, first of all, I'm going to show the DevOps pipelines. So I'm going to go into our pipelines feature. So again, these are the instances we were just looking at. Yindira, did you want to?
Hey, Rob.
Yeah, hello.
You have a question over here. Are the logs compatible with OpenTelemetry?
I don't actually know the answer to that question off the top of my head. Yeah, so sorry about that. We can definitely follow up with that. I don't know, Yindira, if you want to send that chat to perhaps ask one of the engineering team. I know that on a more general basis, there are APIs to access all the logs and all of the interfaces of FlowFuse. So definitely you could export the data and change it into OpenTelemetry format, I'm sure, but we will find out if that is something that's supported out of the box. So these are the same instances that we were looking at previously and also that I was showing on the slides before. So we've got one development instance, one staging or testing instance. I've then got 10 instances which are running in a European facility and 10 which are running in the Asian facility. So first of all, let's go on to development instance. So if I click on here, this is the same view as we are looking at a moment ago for one of the production instances. But what I can do is open up a secure tunnel to this instance. So by switching this here and then go to Open Editor, this is now going to allow me to connect directly to this Node-RED instance. I've just seen another question come in. If you set the logs to JSON, then Node-RED can read it. Yes, you just need to write your own jQuery where necessary. Thanks for that input. I assume that you are commenting on the previous question, so thanks for sharing that. And then just whilst this is loading in, another question, how remote instances talk to FlowFuse in scenario, the edge device on private network and has no access to the internet? Okay, it's a great question. The way that the remote instances talk to FlowFuse is over HTTPS. So they open up a secure tunnel back to wherever the FlowFuse server exists. So as you know, you're pointing out there, well, what if it's on a private network? So if the devices can't access the FlowFuse server, then, and we have quite a few customers that have this set up, if they are in an air gap network or a network which is significantly locked down, you can run a FlowFuse server within that network. So everything I'm demonstrating here is on what we call FlowFuse Cloud, which is a version that anyone can use. You can sign up, there's trials, or you can pay by credit card. But you can also run a complete instance of FlowFuse within your own network. And for where we have customers dealing with highly sensitive data or working in certain industries where they have to be very careful about data residency. So yeah, does data stay in the US, in the EU, etc. We will often see those sorts of customers deploying their own FlowFuse server. And in that case, the devices will be talking over your private network, be that VPN or like VLAN within physical locations. They would be talking back to your own FlowFuse server. So that can all be managed within a network which is entirely cut off from the main internet. Okay, so
Rob,
I
sorry to
go on.
interrupt you. We have another question
Yeah.
from before. It's the first one. It says, can you please touch on migrating from HiveMQ to FlowFuse MQTT broker? What are the impacts and limitations between those two platforms?
So I can talk, thanks, David. I can talk about this in general terms. So uh, yeah, as far as I've seen from my experience, the format of the way that the data is structured within Hive or any other particular provider of an MQTT broker is exactly the same. So therefore, the migration should be relatively simple. I don't think currently the underlying broker that we use in FlowFuse is HiveMQ. I think we may have used it previously. But yeah, we do change that as we're trying to improve the features. So there shouldn't be significant limitations. The only thing, David, I would say is I would need to actually look at whether there's any features that Hive have added on top of the standard MQTT specification that maybe has value to you or to other customers. So, but in general terms, the brokers should work in exactly the same way. Yindira, I think I've answered all of the questions on the yeah. So I don't know if you want to
You
just
have.
mark those all as read. Yeah, just
You have one more. Does the
okay.
MQTT broker in FlowFuse supports Sparkplug B protocol?
I can't answer that off the top of my head, Andre. Thanks for that. Yeah, so I believe that Sparkplug B is just a specific way in which you structure data under MQTT. So if you mean validation of that, then no, I don't think we support that, but it should be able to take data in the Sparkplug format. Um, if that doesn't answer, please let me know. Please ask a follow-up question and we can pass this on to some of our engineers that deal with this in more detail than I do. Okay, right. So this is my development Node-RED instance. This is what would be running on a production line in a factory. Now, in this particular case, I am simulating the data which I am taking. So whereas normally this would be taking telemetry data out of a production line, and I can show you some of this data if I switch this debug on. So what we should see in a moment is, there we go, there's an example payload. So this is some of the data we're getting. We're getting that this is a development instance, it's in Europe, it's numerically, so it's industrial PC1, it's running version 7.6 of the application. But beyond that, we also get some information that's coming from the production line. So in this particular production line, the shift started at 8 a.m. The current temperature of this machine is 28.2 degrees. The current cycle time, so the last time it completed a job, that took 33 seconds. And the current recipe, so this is a production line potentially that can deal with producing multiple different items. The current recipe is rear right. This example is loosely relevant for automotive. So that's like the rear right door of a car in this example. But all of this information is completely simulated. So I've created functions here which are coming up with hopefully plausible data for these values. And it's sending through updates every few seconds. So I think on average, every 3 seconds, it sends through a new one of these payloads. What it then does is sends that information out via this project link node. So what that does is that utilizes the MQTT broker that we've been talking about, so that you can send information from any single or multiple Node-RED instances within your application to any other Node-RED instances within your application. So basically, I'm publishing to this topic confirm, and in a moment, I'm going to show you an instance which is reading that. And then we're going to then take that data and put it into a central system, into a UNS. Just looking at the question that's come in, is there a way to separate the communications between hosts and remote instances? Yes, there absolutely is. Yeah. So I so you can, and I'm going to show this if we get time for me to demonstrate this. I will show how you can use the environment variables to use different MQTT credentials across dev, staging, and production. And I've worked on real world scenarios where we've used this so that as we move this application through DevOps, through the DevOps pipeline, it automatically understands that it should now be talking to the staging broker or that it should be talking to the production broker. In this particular example, to speed things up a little bit, I'm just using naming of the environments to separate out, which I'll show you in a minute. But yeah, you can absolutely do what you've suggested there. So this is where I'm sending out the payload that I've collected here. I'm just going to add in something additional to this payload because usually if I'm an engineer and I'm going on here, I'm probably wanting to make some changes. So what I'm going to do is add in, so we've got shift start, but what I want to do is calculate the shift end automatically. Now, something I wanted to show for this, because there's a really good feature in FlowFuse which extends Node-RED using an AI integration, which actually I find really useful. So I just want to show you. It's a way of writing function nodes really quickly. So if I go up here and click on here, this gives me a prompt where I can just describe a function node. Now I have got a prompt already written just so people don't have to wait while I try and write English. So, but let's see what this is. So create a function that sets message.payload.data.shift-end to be at midnight, 8 a.m. or 4 p.m. Use whichever is next to happen in local time. So that's just me describing a piece of software in hopefully clear English. So, but if I press this button here, what it's going to do is process that request, and it's given me back a function node with hopefully valid JavaScript, which completes what I've just requested. I'm not going to proofread it right now. Probably some of you guys will be much better at checking or spotting any issues with that than I would be. But it's a really effective way to quickly write functions. So all of these functions I'm using here for today's webinar, I just describe them in the written word. So I've now created that new function. I'm going to add it in here to my flow. Oh, if I drop it on there. So we've now got shift start time and shift end time as well. So let's see if that's working. So I'm going to deploy on development. I'm now going to switch back on my debug node. So let's capture, there we go. We've captured one message coming through from this production line. And what I would hope to have, yeah, so we've got current shift starts at 8 a.m. and finishes at 4 p.m. Yindira's popped up. Hi, Yindira.
Hi, Rob. A couple more questions here. One from Joel.
Yeah.
Are the flows under source control be able to track changes, merge changes from multiple devs, etc.?
So yeah, it's a good question, Joel. They are under source control. So, and I can show in a moment doing a comparison from an earlier version to say a current version. We don't currently have a way to merge different. So in the way that you might do, say, under Git, a way that you can merge things in. The issue and the thing that I think lots of people who are working in Node-RED are trying to overcome is how you can show that visually, how you can do that change analysis in a way that you don't miss any important edits. I think for those of us who say work on GitHub, we're used to just reading through and looking at the changes if we're, say, merging a PR, but yeah, it's harder to do it in a visual programming interface. So yes, you can compare different versions, but we don't have a way to merge in different branches, different versions currently. And next question.
I'll leave that up to you.
So a question about using external libraries and security. So
35 nodes, which we have.
yeah, very. So we do have thanks, you do. Yeah, we do have a program called Certified Nodes, within where we monitor the versions of nodes which are commonly used by our customer base. I don't know if Yindira might be able to post a link to that. If you could grab that, that'd be perhaps really interesting for people to read. There's also the ability for you to lock down to use specific, if you're running FlowFuse within your own network, or say within your own public cloud, you can lock down to specific versions. So you can say, I want to use the MS SQL Plus is a commonly used library for interacting with Microsoft SQL, but I just want to use a particular version because we've tested that. Then you can lock that down within your own FlowFuse server. I'll also, if I remember, I will show we have a bill of materials tool that allows you to really quickly look across all of your Node-RED instances and see which versions of any dependencies you're using to, perhaps make that a bit quicker to spot if there's any issues. So, I've added in, we've now got end time. So I'm going to do a deploy on that. No, it's all, so Miguel, it's all within one file currently. Yeah. So they're not separated out currently within one Node-RED instance. That is, each Node-RED instance has its own flows.json file. Okay, so I have now done that deploy, and we can now see we've got start and end time. So what I can now do is close down my connection to this remote instance. So so this is me working as the engineer who's developing a new version. I can then go into version history. I'm going to create a new snapshot. Oh, sorry, press the right button. I'm going to create a new snapshot. So this is going to be called 7.7. Set this as target, create that. So we're going to see that's now appeared. Now back to, sorry, I can't remember the name of the individual that asked this, but looking at how do we do a comparison. So if we go to view snapshot, so we can get a quick visual representation of the snapshot, which can make it a little bit easier to understand what's happened and potentially, give the testing engineer a little bit more information to go on. So we can see this rendering. This is from my prior version. We don't have the end shift time, but then if I come up here and then view this one, we can see that we now have this set next shift end time function that's been added in. So yeah, there's still definitely work to be done here, and I think it's a challenge with any visual representation of programming, but it's something that we're certainly working on, and people within the Node-RED community are working on as well. So I've now created my snapshot. So this is my new potential release. I can now disconnect from this development instance. I'm now going to go onto our DevOps pipeline. So into here. So we can see now, because I just closed down the remote tunnel, it's now redeploying the snapshot that I just created back to that development instance. A snapshot is not just the flows, it's potentially any credentials that you've decided to encrypt into there. It's the specific version of Node-RED, the specific version of all of your dependencies. So the point is, it should be a entirely redeployable version of your application where you should consistently get the same behavior. So this should have deployed now. Let me just check if that's now deployed. Yeah. So we're now running the new version of the application on dev. Yeah, go on, Yandira.
Miguel Machado has a question. Are the flows partitioned in different files? Our source control is concentrated on a single flows.json file?
So I've answered that one. Yeah, so that's the one I
I'm
just
sorry.
answered a moment ago. No problem at all.
And a new one.
Yeah, just demonstrated as a FlowFuse feature. Also, it is a FlowFuse feature. I don't know if that's something that you can get in standalone Node-RED. It may well be that someone else has developed that. It's really valuable, but it's not that complicated. No offense to my colleagues that built it. So yeah, it may be that someone out there in the community has built something similar. I mean, in practice, it's making a query to a large language model, which with the correct prompts can do a good job of writing Node-RED functions. In my experience, it's something I've been using even before this tool was deployed for a number of years, and it's a pretty good way to quickly write functions. I'd always put the caveat around that is you should always only ask a large language model to write something that you yourself can proofread would be my advice, because they can potentially do something a bit crazy. So always, make sure it's doing what you expect. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to deploy the new version I've made from Edge onto staging. So this is all this data has been written to an MQTT broker. So what we should see, and this is hopefully some of you have seen MQTT Explorer before. It's a really good, I think it's a Windows and Mac and Linux application that allows you to see real-time updates to MQTT brokers. So this is the payload that's coming through from my development instance. We can see that's now running version 7.7. We can see it's got the shift end time all in this JSON object. If I look at staging, because I just did a deployment, that's now also running 7.7. If I look at production, so we can see they're still running version 7.6. They don't yet have shift start time because I haven't yet rolled that out to the production instances. So we can see, and I think, going back to one of the questions earlier, potentially these could just be on separate brokers. And normally, in my experience, when, not doing this as a demo, you would probably have a separate broker for production, separate broker for staging and development. I've put these all on one just to make it easier for everyone to see. But I could be changing the credentials in my application to say, okay, because this is development, write it to that separate broker. So let's say I'm now the testing engineer. So I can go on, I can look at the Node-RED instance just as I did when I was working as development. I can view the Node-RED logs. So I will see in here, if I scroll down, so we can see the deployment I've just done. I've deployed version 7.7. This is running under Docker. That's the particular device. So various information that would help me troubleshoot. Normally, I would do more testing than I'm doing right now, but let's say I've gone through all of my testing and I'm like, okay, I'm happy. This is ready to be rolled out to production. So I would go back onto the DevOps pipeline, and now it's just a single click. So when I click here, it's going to take everything that we developed here, tested here, and it's going to deploy it to all of the production instances in Europe. The reason I've done it, in fact, I probably should have done this the other way around, actually. The idea here being that you have like timed deployments. So I've seen before with some of the customers I work with, they may have facilities around the world and they may have downtime at some point in the night. So you would probably, if I got it the right way around, you would have deployed to Asia at midnight, the time in that part of the world, and then later in the day you would then deploy. Oh no, I've got it the right way around. Yeah, you deploy to Europe first and then Asia later in the day. So the idea is you can break this down. The other thing you could potentially do is have these broken down into a smaller set. So you've got like a bleeding edge set of production devices and then your main group. So let's deploy it to the European production set. So I'm going to bring back up MQTT Explorer, because what we should see up here is all of these should flip over to being the new data. This gives you an idea of roughly how long this deployment's taken. So now I have to fill the time while this happens. We can see each, oh, there we go. You see, so we're now getting data through and we've got one left. Yeah, so now all 10 of those production instances in Europe are now running version 7.7. We can see now they have the shift end time. So yeah, that's all working. And yeah, the final step would be, so if we're happy with all of that, I can just deploy it across to the Asian factory as well. Come into here. And again, we will see the deployment popping up. I'll show you now the central instance that's actually processing all of this data and putting it into the UNS. So far, all the instances that we've been looking at are running via our device agents, so remotely on industrial PCs or PLCs, those sorts of environments. But FlowFuse can also allow you to run instances of Node-RED actually within the FlowFuse server. So let's have a look at this production demo instance that I've got here. So open up the editor to this. Okay, so this is quite pretty simple, but I think it might help join the dots together with some of the things I've been showing. So earlier I said that you could use these project nodes to publish and subscribe. So this is subscribing to the confirmed topic that all of the remote instances are publishing to. If I put a debug in here and deploy, what we're going to see is these are all the payloads which are coming in from those 22 remote devices. I'm just going to pause it so we can have a look at one. So this is in the Asian facility. It's production. It's the fourth. It's the fourth production line. It's running version 7.7, and that's the last payload of data that came through. So, but what I'm simply doing then is formatting it. So I take this JSON object. I take out. Well, let's have a look. Rather than me guessing, I take out the so the that it's production, I take out that it's in Asia, and I take out that it's IPC4, and that's the path that I'm publishing to on the broker. I appreciate there are lots of different ways to do this, and arguably the way that I'm saving this data. So if we flip back to here, definitely, I've had feedback from one of my colleagues today going, there are more efficient ways to save that data. Potentially, I could have them as separate values. I just wanted to make it as easy to read as possible on page. So yeah, as this is receiving in all of those payloads, it's formatting it, sending it to MQTT, publishing it into here, and each time one of these lines flashes up, that's a change that's been made to that data as it's coming in from those instances. So then, last thing to talk about would be what about rollbacks? So we obviously none of us ever make mistakes when we're changing our flows or writing software, and definitely even though we never make mistakes, none of those mistakes ever make it to production. But let's say, for instance, in this case, one of my colleagues says, "No, Rob, the shifts don't end at 4 p.m. because the next shift starts at 4 p.m. The shift ends at 3:30, for instance." So there needs to be a half-hour changeover. So I'm like, okay, I didn't realize. So how do we deal with that? So there's two options. I could do a rollback. Let's say if they say, no, this is really, this is breaking something, and we just go back to an earlier version. So let's do that first. So what I want to do is go on to my remote instances. Then I'm going to do a rollback onto development and then send it back through the DevOps pipeline. You don't have to do that. It's just the way I prefer to work. So if I go into version history, so this is me doing it in real time, right? I want to restore version 7.6. So I've now restored that to my development version. I'm going to go back on the pipelines. Let's see if that's actually deployed. So if I look in the Node-RED logs for the development instance, 7.6. So that's already running on my development instance. Okay, so now I go back onto the pipeline again, and I'm going to deploy that through to my staging instance. And then I'm going to deploy it through to Europe, and then on to Asia. So that is in real time how long it took me to roll back. And yes, we're dealing with 22 instances here. It is no more work, is no harder if it was 222. It's the exact same steps. I could actually make it quicker by, say, just having one production group of the pipeline, which included all 20. So, and let's just check. So let's use the broker to check what we should be seeing. Yeah, all of these are now running 7.6. Yeah. So I've done the rollback. So that's fine. But someone said, okay, Rob, we actually needed that feature so we need you to put it back in and show the correct time for the shift ends. So let's just run through this quickly without me now explaining it. Hopefully now everyone's seen it. So I'm opening up a tunnel to the development instance. I'm going to use the AI tool again to do this. So I think this is the correct prompt. Let's have a look at this. Let's have a look. So create function which sets message payload data shift end to be 23:30, 7:30, or 3:30. use whichever is the next to happen in local time. I still feel like I've just thought of a bug in that, but let's assume that's perfect. So let's just create that and drop that in. Oh, and drop that in there and get it in the right place. Okay, and then deploy. And now I can close down my window to this development instance. I'm going to create a new version. So I'm going to call this 7.7. Yeah, 7.8, sorry, 7.8. And then create that, take it back out of dev mode. And then subject to, I probably should do some proper testing on this. Yeah, it's the same process that I just showed a moment ago to roll that out. We've got some questions. I'm just going to do this deployment whilst I'm looking at those questions. And can convert data. I believe that there will be a plugin to talk to. I mean, the best way to answer if there is a way to. So if you think about the question is, can Node-RED communicate with Omron fins? And the best way to answer that is if you search for Node-RED Omron fins, I think you will most probably find a custom node that someone has written, which will allow you to talk to that protocol. I have very rarely, if ever, seen a commonly used protocol which isn't supported. I'm not saying that that's always the case, but there's usually very good coverage for any popular or commonly used protocol. So then just checking that I've not already answered these. So now on to Munir's question. Can the device cloud deployment associated from one stage up? Yeah, I think this is a really good feature suggestion. I'm pretty sure that it's in our, so we run all the development of FlowFuse via GitHub. I'm pretty sure that there is a suggested feature. What I would like to be able to do is when I click go here, so this is the cloud application, which I demonstrated, which is pushing the data into the UNS and also into the historian. I would like to be able to link deployment up here that also pushes things across here, which I think is what you're describing, Munir. So I would encourage, so yeah, I should say all of FlowFuse's development is done via GitHub. It's all done in the open. FlowFuse is open source, so there are some elements of it which are proprietary, but the vast majority, there are free versions that you can use and test out most of the stuff that I've been demoing today. So please, if you are using FlowFuse or you're interested in using it and you want to suggest features, please have a look at our GitHub. And please comment if you see a feature that you think would be useful to you, your organization. That's primarily how we decide what development work we do. Also, we have people from the community that contribute to FlowFuse. So there are features in FlowFuse. For instance, I think I'm right in saying the way that I demonstrated the visual representation of a particular snapshot, that's something that someone else created, to visualize Node-RED. So there are parts of FlowFuse which other people have built and, other outside parties are contributing to. Great. Yeah, thanks, Munir, for that. Yeah, thanks for that feedback. Okay, Trent, I love that you can connect and develop on a remote instance, but I'm curious about dashboards. I know you haven't shown them, but it's a way to access the dashboards remotely through the tunnel. Yes, the way that, so yes, you can access dashboards on the remote instances. One thing that I've not covered today, because it's not really the focus, I'm mostly talking about DevOps, is there's really good user management, role-based access control in FlowFuse. The way, Trent, that I would normally do a dashboard is I would deploy it on an instance running on the cloud. So I would run all of my data, say, back into the instance here, which is kind of what I'm doing. And I would then build out a dashboard here, which can then be accessed by anyone over the internet, because then you can leverage FlowFuse's user management, which can use your own single sign-on, and you can just decide who should be able to see which dashboards. I've seen that work really well in manufacturing companies where they potentially want their, their managers or whoever the relevant people are to be able to access dashboards on their mobile phones. Maybe even when they go outside of their corporate network, they still want to be able to access that data. So, in some, if you need to work within, if you need to be able to deploy dashboards from the devices, you can do that. But I would always consider if you can give a better user experience by using a cloud instance. Okay, I think that's, oh yeah, I mean, yeah, please. That's everything I wanted to talk about today. Oh, just one or two features actually I've mentioned ad hoc, which let me go back to. So bill of materials is one thing that I mentioned. So a question came up about understanding dependencies, and I think potentially if there's a malicious version of a dependency, how can you manage that? So this is our bill of materials. This will tell us of all of the Node-RED instances within the application which I've just demonstrated. So it's 23 in total, one cloud-based, 22 running via the device agent. It tells me the exact version of all of the software. So what versions of Node-RED am I running? Right, so I've got 3 which are running 490 and 22 which are running 317. So where else do I have 2 versions? Oh, well, actually, I'll use this as an example. So, but this would be the same. So we can see, for instance, their moment, which is a way to translate time into, say, human understandable format in Node-RED, which I find really useful. So they're actually, the reason I hesitated to use is they're actually just using version 5.0.0. I'm not quite sure why that one says that, but we can actually see the different versions. But if I come back up here, so if I knew that there was a problem with 317, version 317 of Node-RED, which I don't, to be clear, but if I did, and I quickly want to look at what that impacts, I can click on here and I can see all of the instances which I need to update. Now, actually, I could do that as a single update. So I could update the version of Node-RED, which is running on my development instance. I could then deploy that through staging and then onto all of my production instances as well. So it's not that I would need to go onto each of these, if there was 20 or 200 or more, I can just, in the same way that I built a new version of my application, I can change the dependencies, I can change the version of Moments I'm using or the version of Node-RED I'm using, test that on development, and then send that through the same pipeline to deploy it out, and also potentially do a rollback if I needed to as well. So that's one thing I said that I would mention. We have another question from Vincent and another one as well. Okay, so Node-RED instances running on the devices are just simple Node-RED instances. Does FlowFuse and its DevOps feature allow to deploy flows with custom nodes? Yes. Compatibility checks and warnings. Yes, just in the same way that Node-RED deals with that, Node-RED running under FlowFuse would deal with it in the same way. So, yeah, it's not something well, in fact, no, I have done this because I've used legacy clients for things like, say, certain SQL databases, which then when I've updated Node-RED, it won't, when you try and update Node-RED, it says this doesn't work on version, 3 or 4, whatever it might be. So yes, that works. As I was just saying a moment ago, and yeah, I appreciate you may have asked this question before I was going into more detail. So the specific versions of your dependencies go in those snapshots. So the snapshots I was building, it doesn't just go and grab the latest version of SQLite or the latest version of a particular client. It uses the specific version which you have defined within your snapshot. So you can really tightly control and decide when your dependencies get updated rather than it just being, like more in a, we might have on our laptops or computers where it just updates things and you don't really know what's getting updated. You have detailed control of that. Uh, Show different instances context. Richard, could to show where you manage. So you might be asking there about where I can manage environment variables. I don't know if you want to follow up, and I definitely can demo that. Yeah. And then another question, how did you start multiple instances at once, and how is each accessible. So um, so these instances of Node-RED are all running already. Um, so the way that I'm running these is under Docker. So, and I have a script that I've written that allows me to deploy an arbitrary number of instances. So basically, you deploy them within Docker. There is a key that you get out of your FlowFuse team that links that Node-RED instance that gets brought online back to your team. And from that point onwards, you can manage it all entirely remotely. So yeah, so I'd already started these up. As to what they're running, I can change. So I could completely change the application or the utilization of these instances entirely from this interface, even though some of these, are literally, like thousands of miles away from me. Once I brought them online, I can manage them. Dependent on what hardware you're using, yeah, so some say PLCs or IPCs have a way to, we have some integration with some vendors, which will just bring up the device agent. I've seen some customers where they have a way to deploy new device agents out to any new hardware automatically. If, say, they're needing to manage other applications which are running on their industrial PCs. So there are different ways to approach that. Um, yeah, so the gentleman who asked about managing I can't remember, sorry, the exact wording, it's now disappeared, variables. Oh, hang on, I can view answered ones. Uh yeah, so yeah, Richard, please follow up if you still want an answer to your question. But Yindira, I think that yeah, I've covered everything I needed to. So yeah, and yeah, unless we have more questions, I think
There's one more. I'm not sure if you already answered this one.
I have done. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so if
So
anyone else, yeah, feel free to, yeah. And Yindira, did you manage to get answers back from, um,
yeah, I replied.
brilliant,
I
thank
added
you.
the answer to the Q&A and I believe to the chat bot too.
Yeah, thank
Um,
you. It's a lot to do for just one person, so I really appreciate you being there to
yeah, there
pass
we
those questions.
have
Yeah,
a new one.
yeah, thanks, Richard, for so yes, absolutely, I can show you that. So if I go into or into my remote instances, one moment. So, and then if I go, so first of all, this is my development instance. And then if I go into settings and then environment, did I just go to the wrong place? Oh, okay. Just took a second to load. So you see down here, we've got DB user, DB URL, and DB password. So that say for in this case it's for a SQL server, but you can do exactly the same for an OPC UA server. So this is defining, so in this case, for instance, in development I talk to development.something.com port 1000. Now if I go onto my staging instance and then back into the same interface, we can see there I'm talking to staging.something.com port 1000. The other feature that we've added recently, which I think is great, is you can hide the passwords. So as much as I can access that password to say pull it into a particular client, in this case OPC UA, the password is hidden from the user interface. So I think that's a really good additional feature. So basically what you do is you set the environment variables here for each one of your stages. So, and I'll just show you actually a production one as well. Um, uh, yes, you can. So you can reference different certificates as well. So the way I've only done that with, I've not done that with OPC UA, but there is a way to, you can have assets stored within FlowFuse, which you can then reference. And that asset could be an image or a text file, a trained AI model, or in this case, it could be, a cert file. So yeah, you can absolutely do that. The last thing I just wanted to show on this was, so if I go into a group, so for instance, these are all my European production devices and go into settings and environment. I can also set, so that DB URL, I can set that for the entire group. So I don't need to go in and configure because I know they're all talking to, for instance, the same server within that facility. I can just set that there and all of the devices within that group will inherit that. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. It's cool. Thank you for that feedback.
Big thanks to Rob for the great session, and thanks again to all of you for joining us today. If you'd like to talk about how FlowFuse can power your flows, let us know in the survey, or just head out to flowfuse.com, click that big blue button on the top right, or you can also go to the book a demo. I just share the links to those pages in the chat to make it easier to find. And thanks once again, and until the next deployment. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.